Hi folks, Landman Buck here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to make subsonic 223 or 5.56 ammunition. Now please keep in mind that your weapon will differ from mine. Your barrel length will probably be different as well, and that will affect the overall speed and accuracy of the round. So please keep in mind that this load was developed using a 16-inch 1/8 twist AR-15 platform. If yours is different from that, you could expect to get different results. Now, a lot of people will tell you that a subsonic 223, you might as well have a 22 caliber with a suppressor on it. They simply haven't done the math or bothered to do the research on it. Now, a 60 grain Aguila Super Subsonic 22 travels at 700 feet per second with a 65 foot-pound of energy transfer. A 40 grain standard velocity 22 at 1,050 feet per second has about 98 foot-pounds of energy transfer. The first recipe that I did with 223 ammunition was a 55 grain hollow point, which was traveling at 1,050 feet per second, the same as the 40 grain 22. However, where the 40 grain 22 had a 98 foot-pound transfer, mine had a 134 foot-pound transfer. Now, the round that I am developing here on this video today is going to be a 69 grain bullet, which will be traveling at hopefully 1,050 feet per second, and that should equate to almost 170 foot-pounds of energy. So that's more than double the 22 subsonic from Aguila. While I am not going to cover it in this video, you can Google it for yourself and see the penetrating power of a 22 at distance. Keep in mind this is a 69 grain 5.56. It will penetrate significantly further. The problem with equating everything to foot-pounds is, to understand what a foot-pound is, you have to understand that it's a unit of energy equal to the amount of energy required to raise a weight of 1 pound by a distance of 1 foot. That's according to Webster. However, if you have ever shot a firearm for a very long distance and know that that gun had 2,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, that it will not move 100 pounds sideways 6 inches, let alone lift it a foot. So keep in mind all of that information when you're arguing the fact that a 223 is worthless because of the energy that it has. It's simply not. If you don't believe me, stand in front of one. Now, to make a subsonic round, you're going to need all of the normal equipment that you need to do normal reloading. You're going to need to have your reloading press, your bullets, your brass, scales, trickle measure, powder, funnels, calipers. If you're using military brass, you're going to need a decrimper, and you should always trim your brass, so you will need a case trimmer. Based on all the research that I have done, I have decided to use Trail Boss powder for my subsonic 223s. Now, this is developed for lead bullets, and it's usually used in cowboy action type firearms. However, because of its low density, it's very fluffy powder, which means it stacks very easily in the bullet. It takes up a lot of space. I have decided that this is the one that I'm going to use for my subsonic ammunition. Going through the process step by step. First, you want to select your brass. Always inspect it and make sure there's no cracks, there's no issues with the casing. This is obviously once fired brass. It looks good, a little stained, but it should do the trick. I'm in the habit of always measuring my brass, and I always trim them down to 1.743. So that is my starting point, and that's how I know that all of my ammunition has been standardized. As you can see here, this one is at 1.759, so I need to trim it. My trimmer is a Wilson case trimmer. It's extremely accurate, extremely well built, and unless I am doing bulk bullet loading, this is the one that I will always use. to begin with, you simply place the bullet into the carrier and tap it down so that it's firmly seated. Place the bullet in the trimmer and close the latch. Place the trimmer head up against the case and rotate. You can see the filings coming off. And that is trimmed, properly sized, or properly length sized. And as you can see here, that is exactly dead on to what I want it to be trimmed to, 1.743 inches. Now that the bullet has been properly sized to length, it needs to be decrimped. The military puts crimps on their primers to keep them from being ejected and having all sorts of other issues. So to be able to reload with a standard reloader, you need to remove that crimp. So I have a Dillon crimp remover tool. And if you can see it there, now the primer pocket is uniform and can be easily reprimed. Now you have to reprime and size the neck of the casing. So this is done in my press with one motion. And now the bullet casing is properly sized and has been, if you can see it there, I'm trying to get the focus in, has been properly primed. Alright, now here's the part that you've all probably been waiting for. Now, over the past few days, I've been working with my chronometer, and I have worked down a load starting from 5 grains of Trail Boss, and now we're down to 4 grains. I have dropped it by 0.1 grain each batch, 10 rounds per batch, checking for standard deviation and keyholing and total feet per second velocities and everything with the chronometer. And I am down to, like I said, 4 grains at this point in time. So this is exactly how I go about manufacturing the Subsonic 223.5.56 ammunition. The first thing you need to do is measure out the exact amount of powder that you need. Now what I'm using here is I'm using a vibration type trickle charger that vibrates the powder from this cup down this tube and into the scales bucket. And this is done simply by pushing a button here, and you can see the powder vibrating out and the scale counting up. And that's 3.9, stopped it just in time, and then tap until we get right to 4 grains. Boom, on 4 grains. Now some of this I've had to cut out because I can't hold the camera and do this at the same time, but I transfer the powder from the powder bucket over to a powder funnel, which makes putting the powder into the shell casing so much easier without having to worry about spillage or anything like that. And the easiest way to do that one-handed is just with a couple little shakes, and the powder is in the casing. Alright, now that we have 4 grains of powder in our shell casing, we have one problem. The volume of the powder does not adequately fill up the shell casing, so there's a lot of slop inside. So let's say that the bullet is in your magazine and you're on patrol or you're running or whatever, and there's a lot of movement left and right. So your powder can move towards the front, it can move towards the back, it could be caught in the middle, and when you have a primer strike, there might not be full detonation of all the powder. So we have to make sure that the powder is always up against the primer. And the easiest way to do that is with cotton. There's numerous different things that you can use to pack into the shell casing, but cotton is my choice simply because you don't need much of it at all. It's very wispy, and it will mostly burn in the combustion of the powder. So what you want to do is just pull off a tiny, tiny piece of cotton, and that's actually too big, so I'll take that in half again. That's about right. Now what you want to do, and I can't do it holding the camera at the same time, I'll show you to you in the next shot, is just stretch this out so it's pretty ghost thin. There's what I'm talking about. You want to bring it out so it's just very wispy, very airy, everything. It looks kind of like a spider web, kind of like an old spider web. And that's how you want your cotton to be in its final stage before you put it into the casing. Again, I apologize for having to do so many cuts. Doing this one-handed is very difficult. But I just use a punch, and I take the punch and I force the cotton down into the shell casing. Now once all the cotton is down into that shell casing, it will prevent the powder from moving around inside. You'll always get a solid burn, and you won't have to worry about any slop inside your casing. Alright, so we've got all of our cotton down in there, tamp it down fairly good, and now you do not have to worry about your powder coming out. It is constantly up against the primer, and like I said before, you'll get an even burn on that. Now we're back to the normal loading procedures, but instead of running it through the powder stage, and because we've already run it through the neck sizing and priming, depriming stages, all we have to do is place it into the bullet seating stage, seat the bullet, run it over to the crimp, give it a nice little crimp, and boom, we have our Subsonic 5.56 round. Now it's raining outside, so I can't take you to the crony, but this tested in at 1,063 feet per second. So I need to do just a little bit of tweaking because I try to keep everything at 1,050 feet per second, which makes it so that I can ensure that no matter what the atmospheric conditions are, I will always be subsonic.